IMF should stop, forecasting outlook for individual countries. They should learn lessons from football authorities who do not forecast. Let individual teams in the individual countries do their own forecast. So we should believe our own forecast. Our outlook is brighter than the global outlook. And the IMF and the World Bank have both acknowledged that there's no reason why that will change over the next, year or two. So we should believe in the success of our own reforms, which had, been homegrown. Our reforms had not been dictated by the IMF.
The IMF again comes to my mind. We've always had suggestions, of course, from them. And even in recent times, I think they talked about fuel tax and all. That government was quick to say, no, we are not going that route and all. But my question to you really would be the projections that we've gotten from the IMF in recent times. There's been projections and reprojections, at least considering what has happened in the Middle East and all of that. What do you make of some of this figures being projected? What do you think would be, we saw our Q1 GDP figures, pretty fair. What do you think would be, say, for Q2, and maybe what we'll wrap the year up with, considering the fact that it's a pre-election year? Dr. Teriba, I'd like you to take us through that.
Okay, you mentioned IMF a few times, and I would warn that you should have more regard for your own internal projections than for IMF projection.
Okay.
The IMF does not understand any country's economy better than that country. You are at the World Cup, there are 48 countries at the World Cup. Imagine FIFA trying to forecast how each of the country will perform. Only, the individual countries know how well they prepared. They know their players, they know their teams better than FIFA. Only those countries can make a credible forecast about the outcomes they are likely to get. FIFA does not even bother to forecast. IMF should stop, forecasting outlook for individual countries. They should learn lessons from football authorities who do not forecast. Let individual teams in the individual countries do their own forecast. So we should believe our own forecast. Our outlook is brighter than the global outlook. And the IMF and the World Bank have both acknowledged that there's no reason why that will change over the next, year or two. So we should believe in the success of our own reforms, which had, been homegrown. Our reforms had not been dictated by the IMF. And I think that I listened to the gentleman, the IMF president representative. His understanding of Nigeria's economic situation is at times very shallow. He is confusing federal government financing with Nigeria's financing. In one breath, he will say a federal debt, federal revenue versus federal debt payments. In the next breath, you will say Nigeria's revenue versus Nigeria's debt pay. Federal government is not Nigeria. Nigeria has a federal government, Nigeria has state government, Nigeria has local governments. They have budgets. Nigeria itself has no budget. Nigeria's federation account has no appropriation set against it. So I think that I can see that the gentleman is confused about that. He does not know the distinction between money going into the federation account versus money going into the federal budget. It's the federal that has a budget to fund. Federal collects revenue that it does not retain, that gets shared with other tiers of the government. Nigeria should solve its own problem and minimize how they listen, to the IMF. So I am in support of the government for coming out to say that what the gentleman said remains the opinion of that gentleman. It remains the suggestion of the IMF. The IMF has no control over our National Assembly. They have no control over, our executive. So we should listen to what our own government says. They've said For now, they are not imposing those taxes. And then the other confusion that the gentleman from the IMF has is in one breath he speaks about Nigeria's government revenue. In the next breath, he speaks about tax. He cannot make a distinction between government revenue and tax revenue. Nigeria's revenue is not 100% tax. And if Nigeria is looking for revenue, it doesn't have to be tax revenue. And countries that are doing very well with revenue around the world are not necessarily raising tax revenue to get revenue. For example, about just 30% of the revenue of Dubai is from taxes. And 60%, as heavy as 60% of the revenue raised by Dubai are non-tax revenue. And Nigeria sits in a very good place to raise non-tax revenue. So we could be looking for additional revenue. It does not have to mean that will be more tax revenue. Tax revenue typically, the Dubai relies only on two types of tax revenue. They don't have income tax revenue. So do not let IMF come here and scare Nigerians. The two types of tax revenue that Dubai relies upon are excise and VAT. Both of which are expenditure taxes. Dubai does not levy any income tax, and Nigeria can borrow a leaf from that you can get much more revenue from non-tax sources than from tax sources. So let the federal government look for revenue. Let's support the federal government to get more revenue from assets rather than from taxes. And where you want to do tax revenue, limit it, to expenditure revenue like the customs and excise, like the VAT, not income tax. Do not threaten anybody. With increase in time, we have just come out of very painful reform that is more than taxing, on the income and lives of Nigerians. No taxes for now. Let's be looking for asset-based revenue, of which Nigeria is quite rich about, and let's support the government in generating more revenue for the federal government, for the state government, for the local government, for the federation, and not less threaten ourselves, with more difficulties.
Dr. Ayo Teriba, CEO, Economic Associates, I must thank you so much for your time on the program. We really do appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, then.